You said in your blog that a night on the border between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan was a high point of the trip. And I find that hard to believe because that's a really rough part of the world.
It was a rough part of the world. We come to know the visa process. You go to one point and you get something stamped and go to another point. Usually it takes a few hours. Mm-hmm. And in the middle, they always conveniently have their lunch break, which takes about 3 hours. So we had been there about 6 hours or so. We had sat through their lunch break, and I had all my paperwork finished when I see my friend Colin standing outside of the border. And I said, hey, come over here. And he said, I can't. And so I went over and talked to him, and it seemed that our visas started the next day. They hadn't noticed it on my paperwork.
So you were in Uzbekistan, Colin was in Kazakhstan, and he wasn't allowed to cross till the next day.
Right. We were stuck there, and we were getting ready for a very, very miserable night in the desert between these two countries. And, of course, there's no place to eat, and there's no water or anything in between here, no shops. It's just a desert. So a man walks over to us, and he kind of motions towards this coach bus and says, hey, we're going to have dinner. Would you like to share it with us? Or at least, again, that's what we thought he said. So we talked it over and decided, hey, there's nothing else to do. Let's go over there and see what these people are all about. And we went over and sat on the ground on the side of this bus with this man and a few other men, and we learned that they were bus drivers. And they shared their dinner of stale bread and potato soup with us, and we brought out our bottle of vodka we had purchased in Kazakhstan, and we became very popular. We ended up talking for hours and hours.
Wait a second.
We didn't really... Yeah.
What language were you talking?
Well, that's the thing. We spoke for hours, but we didn't know much Russian, and they didn't know any English. So really, it's a matter of body language and laughing, and it's surprising how well that can connect with people. And at the end of the night, it got dark out. Everyone was going to sleep, and the man who'd invited us over, he said, you are our guests. Sleep in the bus, sleep in our sleeping quarters, and we'll sleep outside. And we said, no, that's all right, but thank you. And he insisted. And so we ended up sleeping in the quarters in the bus while they slept outside or under the bus in the luggage area. And the next morning they woke us up, made us breakfast, and we were off.
Anyone listening who's ever been to a part of the former Soviet Union or the Slavic world will be smiling as they listen to your retelling the magical way that a bottle of vodka shared among strangers suddenly makes it such that people can actually understand or think that they understand what the other ones are saying.
Vodka's magical over there.
It's money, it's all kinds of things, right? Scott Brills had his summer of adventure trying to get to Mongolia and trying to raise money for charity in a rally car race. You're listening to The Story. I'm Dick Gordon. Once the border guards finished up Colin's paperwork, the two continued their drive through the desert towards Bokhara. They covered a lot of ground, but in the end it was their little car, the Geo Metro, that thought it could carry them through the Pamir Mountains in Tajikistan, but soon after the exhaust pipe fell off, the car died.
The Geo Metro made it far further than anybody would have thought upon looking at it. We were about 7 hours outside of the last city when I was going to pass two semi-trucks on this road, and the road was absolutely horrible, the worst one we had been on yet, and we were just bouncing around inside of the car, and I go to the left to pass the semi, and then I notice that my steering's gone. So I
you're turning the wheel
brakes.
And the car's not turning, or what?
All of a sudden, when I go to I turn left to go around the semi, and then I feel the steering is really loose, and I notice I have no steering at all. So I stop the car, and we get out, and we check the steering, and everything seems all right. So I decide to start up the car again and see what's wrong. And then I notice that it won't go into gear, and our transmission is shot. And then I look under the car closely, and I notice that the frame had collapsed on top of the wheel.
You're pretty well done at that point.
As much as I wanted to tough it out and keep going past then, we both came to the conclusion that would be pretty fruitless to do that, because even if we were to somehow fix it, we weren't going to make it the next few days on this, the toughest of all the roads that we were going on.
So what's the decision, Scott? To go ahead and leave the car there, or what?
We tried to hitchhike. It was getting dark out. It was cold. We were on a 10,000-foot plateau, 7 hours away from the nearest city. And amazingly, the second car that passed us stopped. And he tried pulling us with a tow rope, and that was destroying the car with the roads being that bad. So he drove us 7 hours back to the city we had just been at.
Sorry, you left the Geo out there then?
We pushed it to the side of the road. And
did you have any kind of ceremony, any sort of farewell?
Well, we had all of our stuff in there, so we couldn't just leave it.
Oh, you were going to come back at some point, or
we
somehow.
We were going to come back and grab it. We didn't know what would happen with the car, but we knew we had to come back. So he drove us back to Korog, where we had just been at. He helped us secure a flatbed truck that we could pay a couple $100 to drive out in the middle of nowhere, get the car on top of this truck, drive back, and we took it to the mechanic the next day. And the mechanic has never seen this type of car before. They have no parts. They have no lift. They just have a hole in the ground that they crawl under the cars with. And he said, well, we'll fix it for you for $200. And I really doubted that they could fix that amount of damage.
Were you willing to gamble the money, though?
I was thinking about it, and cooler heads prevailed. Colin said, hey, he might fix it, but it's going to break again when we're maybe in a rougher spot this time on top of a 15,000-foot mountain, and we're going to be in even more dire straits. So I listened to him, and it just so happened that the guy that had picked us up, his nephew, was looking for a car, and so we decided to sell it to him. And
do you mind me asking how much you got for it?
We got $1,000 U.S.
What?
Yes.
For a 9-year-old rusted-out Geo Metro with no transmission, a broken frame, and no steering? That's a good deal.
And that's what I thought, too. And I took this into account when I was wondering whether I should go ahead to fix it and continue on or to sell it. And I thought, we're not going to get a better deal than this because it really is in bad shape. And they looked it over and they saw what was wrong with it, but they decided to buy it anyway, and we could have gotten more money for it. That's the funny part, because we said $1,000, and they said, okay. There was no haggling involved.
Should have asked for $5. Scott Brills' friend Colin was at this point too short of money to continue, but Scott wasn't done. They were raising money for a kindergarten. You're listening to The Story. I'm Dick Gordon. Scott took a plane and a train and eventually made it to Mongolia, where he was met by his friend Bridget.
I felt like I had cheated a bit, and I wanted to make up for it. So when I got to Mongolia, Bridget said, I'm going to the Gobi Desert to run in the Gobi Marathon in 3 days. You can come with me, or you can stay at my apartment and watch my cat and dog. So I decided, since I was looking forward to driving through the Gobi in our car, but that wasn't possible, to join her and a few others in the 16-hour taxi ride down to the Gobi Desert to participate in this marathon. However, I didn't know what I had really signed up for, having never done a marathon before and not being a runner at all. Everyone thought I was just nuts to be doing this.
I'll sign on to that.
And I really, at that point, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't. I just knew that this sounded like a real challenge, and I thought if I did it, I would kind of make things right with my having hopped on planes to get there part of the way.
Did you even have a pair of shoes? I mean, proper running shoes?
No, I didn't. I had the same pair of shoes I had done the whole trip in. They were a pair of hiking shoes, thick tread. I had my T-shirt. I had a pair of zip-off pants. I had no proper equipment at all.
Kind of sounds like the car race all over again. Scott Brills got lost on the marathon, wound up in a yurt, then on a motorcycle. But the point is, after all that, he finished. And the money for the Mongolian kindergarten was delivered. Scott Brills joined me from the studios of WDET in Detroit. So, what sort of adventures have you been up to? You can get to me through our website at thestory.org.